All right, Andrew, a lot of the technical things you have very solid. You've got a clear statement of what your thesis is, although it seems like it might be a little more specific than you want it to be. There's a very good preview. All the structural stuff is very easy to follow. You did a good job citing your supporting material. The one thing on the citations that I think you might want to work a little bit differently, you're using post citations. It's usually better if you cite the material before the source before you give the material, because it's easier to distinguish then from the supporting, from what you're saying versus what is coming from, you know, a direct quote or the formula there. So organizationally, everything is really sharp. The supporting material is cited clearly. The explanations and the audience interest, that's where I think you've got a problem. And the problem is that you're trying to do something in a short amount of time that I would guess you probably spent weeks in training learning, you know. And so what you want to do is you kind of want to give us an overview of this thing. As soon as you say formula, most people's minds are clicking out going, uh-oh, math's involved, and you know, I didn't come prepared to do any math. I haven't thought about it. I didn't bring my calculator. I'm not able to do this in my head, and so they're not thinking about those kinds of things. So I don't want to say you have to dummy it down a little bit, but a speech is always going to be simpler than any written work. Something that you can read and follow. You can always go over it again if you didn't understand it. I always tell people that one of the big differences between reading and listening is that if you didn't understand something when you're reading it, you can go back over and say, well, what does that mean? And you can look at it and stare at it for a few minutes. But with these formulas, nobody's going to be able to do that in the short amount of time that you've got to speak. So I think that you need to kind of condense the material a little bit. Get to the, you know, here are the three things that somebody needs to consider when they are in this job, all right? And you know, tell us what those three things are and explain there's an extensive amount of calculation in figuring these things out. I'll give you a basic example about how that would work. Okay. And that's kind of give us a thumbnail on it, because that's going to be a lot clearer in a short presentation. I thought the visuals were pretty solid, except, of course, every time the math formulas came up and people are going, okay, wait a second here. And one of the things that threw me off a little bit, I was going to mention this about the veneer thing, too. This is something else that happened. Here we are going through this whole precise thing that you've got described here, and at one point you say they round off for the purpose of doing an easier division to 1/6400th. And I'm thinking, well, 1/6300th would be closer if you were rounding it. 1/6400th, that seems like it's a pretty substantial change over those kinds of distances. Right. Maybe that affects it. And as soon as you introduce something like that, and you're not going to have time to explain all the things, that kind of shows why it becomes too complicated. And the thing about the veneers, this is what I was thinking about. This is not your speech. At one point you said, you know, the veneers are permanent, and then the very next one, of course, sometimes they have to be replaced. And I'm going, how's that one work? You know, yeah, no, I know, but yeah. Like I said, it's just one of those things. There's a little bit of an inconsistency, and that's what made me remember it about your speeches. There's a little bit of an inconsistency with something that you've explained, and you had the same kind of issue, and it just popped into my head, and I'm starting to think about that instead of paying attention to the point that you're trying to make. Although, again, I'm not doing math in my head while you're doing this, so don't worry about that. All right, thank you.
In Russia,